Hey, welcome to the 253rd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Kyle McConaughey, Austin Kress, and Kevin Schumacher. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Unlow. Today we've got Daniel Scarpati. He's the author of a new book, Gofers, on the front lines of film and television. It's a book about being a PA, being a production assistant, which is a thing we allude to all the time and something that everyone will tell you. That's, the first job you ever get in Hollywood is as a production assistant, which is true, but also we don't talk about it a ton because it's been a minute since Oren and I have been PAs. Oren, as a quick sidetrack, tell me the brief history of your PA career.
I don't know if I would call it a career, but when I first moved to LA, I wanted to just be on set as much as possible. And whenever there was any opportunity to help out, I have a couple friends that went to AFI, and I PA'd and boom opped on those things. I PA'd on, I think my roommate, I mentioned she was a camera loader, so she got me to PA on some big music videos. I did this Jamiroquai music video, the one I got fired from. There's no better way to get on set and to learn. But it's surprisingly...
That's what you get for showing up to set virtually insane.
Yes. It's interesting because it's not like... While it is kind of an entry-level job, it's not like a job where you can literally just know nothing and show up to set and hang out.
It's quite brutal, I think, actually.
And
there's a huge chasm between good PAs and bad PAs. And the ones that are fast learners, I think, become good PAs really quickly. If you have hustle and you're paying attention, you'll get there no problem. But those first couple jobs can be quite bewildering.
Yeah. And I think anyone that has any interest in like figuring out how to get into Hollywood and on set should check out this book. Even just the table of contents, which is on Amazon, is so great because Daniel just kind of breaks down all the different types of things you would do as a PA on set and kind of what productions are. And he even talks about like sleep and about finances and about the freelance life. It's really cool.
Yeah. You know what's funny though, Oren, because I would liken my PA quote unquote career to yours in that like neither of us did it a ton, and pretty quickly we started specializing. We started doing, I became an art PA relatively quickly, and or I was in intern places, things like that. But I think that there is a big distinction between a person who is volunteering on a small, let's say a student short or something like that, where everyone's taking things quite seriously, but it's more of a flat management style where the hierarchy isn't quite so deep. Whereas Daniel has a ton of experience working on big TV shows and feature films, things that are so big that there's a department of PAs. And so Daniel wouldn't go from being a PA to a boom op over the course of a week worth of shooting, because there are unions involved, and the people boom operating are much more skilled than a guy who just has a lot of endurance or whatever.
Right, who's willing to hold the boom.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that his expertise and his experience, I think, really shines through in a way that ours is lacking a little bit in that way,
For sure. There's this kind of like trade-off in Hollywood that I'm sure everybody knows about it, which is the lower position you're willing to be on for longer, the higher in the Hollywood network you can plug yourself into. So if you're willing to work in the mailroom, even though you went to Harvard or whatever, you can work at the biggest agencies with the biggest stars, as Steven Spielberg and Julia Roberts and all the, whatever. If you want to be a DP on day one, then you're going to be shooting stuff for your friend, and it's going to be small, and you'll work your way into bigger things and indie things and corporate stuff. And but if you want to be working on, The Walking Dead or something, and you get to be like the assistant to a writer or something, that's like, even though it might seem like a low job on the totem pole, it's like you're plugging yourself in at a much higher level in Hollywood.
The pole itself is higher up the mountain, we'll say.
Yeah.
Stretch that metaphor a little too far. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that I don't know that we talked too much with Daniel about, but I think everyone has to kind of make a choice at a certain point about where they want to land on all of that, And I think that when you're in a Hollywood environment that's really structured, I think some people really take to that, and some people chafe against it a little bit more. And so, I think that's one of the first big decisions that every filmmaker has to make is like, where do you want to fit in and all of that? And so, yeah, I think, like I said, Daniel's got a ton of insight about what it takes to be a great production assistant, especially in the big leagues.
Yeah. I do wonder sometimes I'll see on Twitter someone say like, hey, this is my path to selling my first, screenplay into a studio. I started as an assistant here, and then I became a story editor. Then I did this. Then I wrote one episode on this show. Then I starved for 3 years. Then I did this. And then I now sold my first script like 15 years later. And I think to myself, like, if I wanted to follow that path, there's no way anyone would hire me to be that like office PA assistant, maybe they would, but they'd probably rather hire someone like kind of straight out of college, right?
Yeah, it is tricky. I think there is like a little bit of an internal bias because those jobs do not pay well. And so there is this perception that the older you are, the larger your quote unquote nut is, right? Like, do you have a mortgage? Do you have people to support all of that stuff? I've known PAs who were, older than your average PA for sure. And I think that, again, it kind of boils down to what sort of environment you're in. But I think the other thing that's really important and that people learn relatively quickly, but it's worth thinking about, is that like there's a big difference between a set PA versus an office PA versus a writer's PA, and they all have different pathways. So like it's ideal that if you are on set that you want to either be in production or be an AD. And if you want to be a writer, then you kind of want to be in the writer's room. And so sometimes the term PA is just kind of we kind of lump all of those different jobs together, but like one person is locking up a city street so that people don't walk into a shot. Another person is photocopying a ton, and another person is literally taking notes for a ton of writers all at once. And then, if you lump an assistant in there as well, then the job becomes even more varied. So,
yeah. And if you get to the very top rung, you can bring a burrito to James Cameron, and then he will throw it on the screen because you accidentally put sour cream in it.
I think James Cameron's supposed to be pretty nice. Michael Bay. There you go. Michael Bay will scream at you.
Yeah.
Is Cameron not nice?
I've heard he's specific about his burrito.
Well, look, I respect that at a certain point.
That's how I am with Half and Half. People know. People know. Don't cross me with your whole milk. So before we talk to Daniel, I just had like a quick topic that I was curious your thoughts on, which is about social media and as a freelancer. There are some directors I know that we both know that will kind of post photos of themselves on set often, like on Instagram and Twitter. Like, here's a tip I learned, this is fun, or hey, it's on this, I worked with this actor and something happened with this actor today, so I'm going to post this thing. And I feel like as a freelancer, part of the way you get work is by reminding the world that you are a director.
Mm-hmm. And that you're working, right? Work begets work.
Exactly. So I was curious, like, do you ever, I feel like you don't really do that. I don't see you posting like shots from set, like, 6 months after you're on set, or like, a different time.
I do that if I have the foresight to get the shots, basically. And also like what sort of relationship do I have with certain other crew members? Like sometimes I'll talk to an AD and I'll be like, hey, could you make sure you get like a couple good photos, or, like a pal, basically. Like if I'm genuine friends with someone, we kind of like look out for each other on that front. Or if it's like something where the schedule is comfortable enough that I'm not going to be slowing the show down,
Right.
And also...
But I just mean like selfies.
The nature of talent.
Or just photos you take. Like you see Jordan Brady's always like, hey, look, here's my storyboards, and this is why I put them in. I put them on a big board.
I would say I haven't been posting much since the pandemic, but like if you look through my Instagram feed, I think it's more set shots than it is other things.
Right. I guess I'm just saying, like, do you think there's value in kind of keeping this heartbeat alive on social media, showing people you at work, even though, let's say you might have like a dry spell for a few months and you're not working, but we know like the way we get jobs is we tell people like, oh yeah, I'm a director and I'm working on this and this. And then they're like, oh, you know what? I also am doing I need a dog director. Like,
yeah,
Matt does dogs.
I think certainly it's valuable. Over the years, I've done it less because the mechanisms by which I get work have changed. But it's always good just to kind of remind people that you're doing fun, cool things.
Yeah. I mean, that's part definitely. Of like the fun with like all my Blender stuff and things. Like my own home projects is it's maybe I haven't directed something noteworthy or something that I can take post photos from in a while, but at least I can post something and say like, hey, I'm a filmmaker. Here's,
You know what's funny?
Here's me being a filmmaker.
I hadn't thought about it. The complication of, like, I had a handful of like solid photos and great spots that I was really excited about last year. For whatever reason, always lined up with something where it felt insensitive to post about it. Do you know what I mean? Like if the country's in the middle of like a coup or civil unrest or whatever.
I remember you made that video talking about how fun it is to make out with random people, and then COVID hit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no. For whatever reason, I was like, well, I'll just kind of stow this away and think about posting about it later. And so, it has been on my to-do list to repost or post the spots that I'm especially proud of that I shot last year. And so I also, frankly, to be personal, Facebook has put a pretty bad taste in my mouth as of late. And so I've tried to really wean myself off of it. And yeah, I haven't posted there much, partially because of that. And so there is that kind of balance of, it is the place where a lot of my business contacts are. And, we don't really have, like, LinkedIn isn't really a thing unless you are working with really corporate sorts of shows, like my WB friends are all on LinkedIn. My Comedy Central friends are all on LinkedIn, but my crew friends, for the most part, are still Facebook friends or Instagram friends or something like that.
Right.
So
I'm looking on your Instagram right now, Mr. Matt Enlow.
Yeah.
And I see
everything's pretty old. Yeah.
Yeah. You have like a photo from 14 weeks ago when you were on set on the Halloween thing that, I did a couple of VFX shots on for you. And it's just one picture of you there with a cool hat. It says just shoot it.
I didn't take many photos because it was during COVID too. So it was just like, it was like a kind of a gnarly day,
Yeah.
Like we did, speaking of like not having the leisure or the time or knowing anyone well enough to be like, hey, take a photo of me pointing while I'm wearing 16 masks.
Yeah. Just as like a thought experiment, would it be fun to like clip like the part where like the guy hits the pumpkin with a baseball bat or like something and just say like, we went through 7 pumpkins doing this. Like it's always fun to find, or
yeah, certainly. Or I think also our friend Roxy, previous guest of the show, I think she's got a show out called Mira Mira that's rolling out as we speak on Facebook Watch. Everyone go check it out. Mira Mira, MIRA space MARA. Anyway, she did a thing where she would show a still as one shot and then you would see the board as the other shot. And I've thought about that. Or you do those great animatics. The boards on those spots are really good. So yeah, I should do it, but I just haven't. Partially because also like I want things to really be back for good. I feel like the yo-yo of commercial work in particular has been really so volatile that like 1 week, my reps will be like, we're all so excited. We're back in it. We've got 16 boards for you. And then,
week,
2 days later, I'm like,
I'm in the hospital.
How's my reel going? And they're just like, what? Yeah. So yeah, I've kind of waited for that reason as well. But all of which is to say, I'm probably overthinking it. Is social media good for your career? Yes. All caps, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there are some directors that I know have not done much, but from their Instagram, it looks like they're doing awesome things. And I'm like, ooh, I wonder if she would want to come on the podcast or something because I'm seeing all these cool things. And then I see these other posts. I'm like, oh no, she's
You're like, wait a minute, that's 15 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. Or 1 year old.
You're shooting on film. Yeah. Or a 1 year old. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But yeah, just something I've been thinking about lately. And because I do think that some of my work lately has come from me just
posting about
and people saying like, oh, I saw you're working on this thing, would you be into this thing, where it just kind of gave them an in, or at least reminded them that I exist.
Yeah, totally.
Anyhow, cool. Anything else?
That's it, man. I think let's talk to Mr. Scarpati, Daniel Scarpati, about becoming an awesome production assistant after we remind everyone about patreon.com/justshootitpod. If you're listening to the show, you probably already know that we have a Patreon page where you can go and throw us a couple bucks to show your support. We've got a handful of people working on the show now, kind of a not insignificant amount of overhead, and all of that money even if it's a couple bucks a month, goes towards paying our editor, Sarah, who's there to make sure that shows are going up on time and that our unpaid endorsements are around. Derek Aiello, who's posting everything on social media so that you know who our guests are, what's happening next, and being reminded of when you want to listen to the show. And we got a little bit of new gear. There's been a bit of a strain on remote recording recently, so we've had to upgrade things here and there. All of that money goes to keeping the show kicking and alive. And honestly, I don't know if we could do the show without Derek and Sarah at this point.
Yeah, no, I
think we'd probably slack off and just not do it. Yeah,
I'm barely present emotionally or mentally. Most of what I say is driven by an AI.
Yeah, I'm blacked out right now. I can't even see straight.
No, but check it out. Patreon.com/JustShootItPod. We appreciate it. And here is Daniel.
Daniel, you wrote the book on being a PA, and I was the saddest combination of a PA who was so invested, who was trying his hardest, and was genuinely terrible. I was a really, really bad PA. So that it always makes me laugh. I was lucky that I managed to move into different areas of the industry there to kind of bypass it, but I was genuinely bad. Oren, did you PA much?
It couldn't have been that bad.
I thought I was a great PA. It was the only job I've ever been fired from. And I did have a director one time yell to the producer, "Why is the fucking PA giving me notes about me?"
Yeah, the number one worst thing you can do as a PA is give the director notes.
Director notes or the cast notes, half a dozen in one. Yeah, that's either one.
Dude, I think I told you I did a shoot where the PA was like locking up, so he was like next to the car where the actress was sitting, and she was like just having trouble getting. It was like a real like forced, unnatural line of dialogue that some like creative person wrote somewhere. It was a bad dialogue. She was just really having trouble selling it, and so we did it take after take after take. After 4 takes, the PA comes over. He's like, what if you're just like really pissed off? What if you say it? And I was like, can I talk to you for a second? Do not.
No, that's not exactly the way that works.
When I gave the note to the director, it was like, first of all, I shouldn't have, and I had no idea what I was doing. But it was a student film. It wasn't like
same. Yeah.
I was on Law and Order.
Yeah, you do. And look, that's the advantage of doing a student film is you make some pretty dumb mistakes, and because they're not paying you, hopefully they, in a thoughtful way, teach you the right way to do something rather than just scream at you or fire you. But anyway, Daniel, I have a hunch that you've got a lot more insight about what it takes to be a great PA than that one, albeit important piece of advice. Tell us about the book. Where can people buy it before we kind of give people a taste?
It's called Gofers, on the front lines of film and television. It is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, at some local bookstores if you're in New York City. We're working on getting it at Book Review in Long Island, out in Huntington, I think it is. But yeah, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, www.passingplanes.com/book. All the links are there.
I love so much that you got it into a couple local bookshops. That's great, man. That's awesome.
That's been my one of my number one priorities this year, was to see it on a shelf somewhere local that, is near a lot of the studios that the stories in the book, are taking place, and be able to share it with the local community and give them an option outside of the big box stores online, which is, they're great, they're awesome. But in a time of supporting local businesses, I thought it would be a little bit of a boost for them too. So all the boats rise.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, why did you, what inspired you to write the book? Why'd you dive into this endeavor?
Yeah, given that I think most people get the PA job to get into the industry and try as fast as they can to get past the PA job.
It was a lot of things, a lot of reasons that I decided to write it. And one of the things that made it happen, I try to put a positive spin on the negative. Like I'm sure, I know from listening to your past episodes and a few other podcasts about the industry and news articles, everybody's trying to find ways to stay busy and stay active during the pandemic that we're all still very much in. And this time that I had, this forced time off, was the inspiration I needed to sit down and finish this project that I began working on 3 or so years ago. The idea kind of started coming into my head as I was working on set. Oh, and earlier you said I wrote the book on production assistants. I want to be very fair and say two things right off the bat. There are other books, a few others about being a production assistant. It's a very small handful based on what I know. There could be more, but nobody was ever writing about the emotional and physical health side of things, which I thought was a very, very big. Nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about the life.
The reason that they don't tell you how, like, what the hours are like for on a film set in film school, it's because you would decide not to be a filmmaker. You'd be like, wait a minute, I'm going to work for peanuts for years, and I'm going to sleep 6 hours if I'm lucky for months at a time? Dad, you're right. I'm going to go into real estate.
You're not wrong. I think less people would be so inclined to hit the ground running if they knew. But I there's a part of me that likes to believe the more that people know and the more that they're armed with, the better educated they'll be and the more selective they'll be when they reach the point that they can be selective, in that really beginning phase of when I knew no one, because I come from a family where my dad works in the dental field in a dental laboratory, and my mother was a, assistant religious education teacher. So I'm pretty far removed from the industry, as many of us are. I think everybody here is, right? Did anyone have any kind of direct connection onto a set? Or
yeah, no. But certainly,
I did watch the Zucker movie Top Secret over 100 times. So if that doesn't count for something,
wait, have you really seen that movie 100 times? And I'm just now finding out about this.
As a kid, I would watch it probably. My dad had it on VHS, and I'd probably watch it like 10 times a summer when I would stay at his house.
Oh wow! I think it was Jurassic Park or Lost World for me. The two of those together, that was my 100-time movie. Yeah, I know what that's like.
Actually, just to go totally off course, as I usually do, what do you guys think is better, like as an entry-level job in either Hollywood or New York or the film industry? Do you think it's better to PA on like a big show, like a Law and Order or some big show, Girls, whatever's shooting in New York? Or do you think it would be better to be like a grip or an electrician, or like kind of have a slightly higher level job on like an indie film or like a student film? Because I always thought about that. Like, there's the people that go and work at the mailroom at CAA versus the people that go and try to write a short film and make it like. And even though they have a technically higher level job on this indie project, they're not getting plugged in with the big players like you would in the mailroom of CAA.
I'll jump in quickly and say I still think it's tough because you specified if you're going to be the higher up position, that would be on an indie film. I was going to caution. And if you were going to say on a big show, start as a PA or start as an apprentice, or even a PA for some camera departments have a camera PA. I think that a lot of those departments, the ones that are members of unions, will really encourage a person to stick with it if they're good, and you will very quickly be fast-tracked on that one path. Whereas if you're a production assistant or one of those non-union positions, location assistant in some areas, you have a little more freedom to say, I don't necessarily have to go this way. If I've started working and I'm on the union track, I can be a little bit more, anybody can move around, but I think I would go the PA route in that scenario.
Right. But you think starting on a big show that's what you did, right? You kind of started on big Hollywood type stuff? I started on pretty small, actually, when I didn't know anybody. I took to Craigslist. I took to a lot of the places where people still take to find those opportunities. And I've heard you talk about in episodes past, just looking for work. Anybody would hire me for free, no pay. I just need experience. And I got taken advantage of, just like a lot of people do in the beginning. But, you meet that one person who goes to a paying job and says, hey, I could get you a PA spot on this one, $50 for the day. It's a 18-hour day, but hey, you'll be, and I'd say, of course, you do enough of those, and then eventually you get referred by someone who knows someone to that PA job on, Madam Secretary or Murphy Brown, one of the other shows I eventually ended up on, and it took time, but eventually they came through. And did it seem like on the bigger shows you had more focused responsibilities than on the independent, like the Craigslist jobs? Like on a Craigslist job, I imagine the PA is carrying sandbags and picking up lunch and driving actors. I mean,
you're kind of describing the difference between union and non-union, though, right? Like, even though the PA may not be union, if Transpo is, then you're sure as shit not driving people around, for instance, right?
Right. or if you are, and you're being asked to do that by the producer, then hopefully you have a Teamster captain who's going to go yell at the producer and not you.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because I've had it both ways. I've been yelled at and, watched the person say, I'm not mad at you, but I'm very mad and I need to go handle this. And then I just hear screaming and expletives from somewhere else.
Yeah. To answer your question, Oren, I think it's feasible to do a little bit of both, because I think that the value of being a PA is in having the ability to observe how things work without being necessarily involved in every single aspect of things. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can watch a union show and be like, oh, I see the differences between this and something smaller. I think the other alternative is like being an office PA, which we don't talk about as much on the show, which maybe feels less glamorous in the sense that you're not on set and you're not like in the mix quite the same way. You're just like in an office, but gives you insight to how studios work, for instance, or how production works. There's a lot of different things that can be really great.
Yeah. If you're cool, then can we just kind of go through the table of contents of your book? And
yeah, that's fine.
Just talk about some things. So the second chapter is called What I Wish They Taught in School.
Yes. The first, not to skip over it, showbiz means war. That is what I learned. That's the biggest lesson that I learned that I like to instill in a lot of people who, say to me, what is being a PA like? And it feels just like being on in an active field of war sometimes, with the proximity to firearms and stunts on some shows like The Blacklist. I mean, it's crazy. You feel like you're in the middle of a battlefield.
And who's the enemy in your metaphor?
In my metaphor, the enemy, probably all the people who continuously put you down as a PA. You really want to fight them back.
Time or something.
No. It's a very personal enemy. Time is everybody's enemy, time and money. But no, as a PA, it's the people who are trying to put you down.
And you think those people are for real? Like what we've seen in movies of PAs being talked down to, like all those kind of that stigma, you think that's a real thing?
It definitely exists. I have seen it firsthand. I have worked with people who I've later heard were fired because of, harassment issues to PAs and other crew members. So I've seen it.
Can I ask, Daniel, with the people, just generally speaking, or the people who are abusive, how high up the ladder are they? Are you talking about like studio types? Are you talking about like people a notch or two higher on the pecking chain than a PA? Like what, just generally speaking, did you feel like it was across the board or
the few that's a good question, and it's definitely something to address. The few instances that I saw, they were people who had been in the industry a long time and were pretty high up on the chain, and most people didn't expect or didn't know what was going on because they thought, oh, that's Bobby Brown. What, he's been doing this for 80 years, Bobby Brown. What are you talking about? The whole time he's been lambasting PAs off on the side, and it would eventually come out, and the people who were the ones getting reamed would be kind of a little happy. I mean, I never want anyone to. I try to be nice. I don't want anyone to lose their job, or I just wish people would be a little nicer sometimes and remember that we're not necessarily saving lives every day. We don't need to be destroying one another to get it done.
Yeah, when I was fired, the meanest people to me were the costume designers who I was like helping out, and also the production coordinator. She just like tore me apart and like was complaining about me in front of me to other people. It was just like humiliating. But anyway,
I shouldn't laugh, but it's a little funny.
I'm surprised you say costumes. Usually costumes and wardrobe, in my experience, are some of the nicest people.
Yeah, I think kind of the takeaway is more that it can be anyone. It
can
thing.
Yeah,
it can. Yeah, 100%.
Well, so what are some of the things you wish they taught in school that they didn't?
The whole point of that chapter is I would get asked by people when I'd go back to my alma mater, Macaulay Honors College at Brooklyn College. I would tell people, oh, I'm working as a production assistant. Everybody would say, what are things that I should be doing? And I would constantly say, and I regret not doing it, taking an accounting class or some kind of, simple, this could really apply to any industry. It's not just us, but I'm sure you both know, and everybody who's listening knows, you have to be able to be a freelancer and keep track of your own finances. You got to learn about those tax write-offs. You have to be able to budget. You have to know that you're always going to be selling yourself. And you get told you'll be moving from job to job. But I didn't know, and all the people that I went to school with didn't know what exactly that meant until you really see, oh, in 1 week, in one 5-day work week or 6 sometimes, I could be working on a different set with totally different people every single one of those days.
Right, and they all pay you in different ways. Here you're on payroll. Here you have to fill out this form. Like
some are tax-free cash, some are, it's every different
the
angle.
paperwork, right? It's like my first few times when someone's like, yeah, fill out these 20 sheets. And I'm like, for what? They're like, well, do you want to get paid? I'm like, yeah, but why do it? Can you just give me a check? It like boggled my mind.
This much?
I saw the grip department, like they would have like the key grip would like fill out half the forms for the people, and they would spend like an hour doing paperwork. It was nuts.
Pretty bonkers. And I remember the first day I was like gigging on something, and like I think it was my DP like just had his passport with him, and like to make things super streamlined. And I was like, oh, right. Like you do see the difference between people who, like you're saying, Daniel, have to deal with like, 1,000 different ways of getting paid versus I feel like, coming from the corporate world, you just got a paycheck. You know what I mean? Like, and so, and more importantly, I think the larger point you're making, Daniel, is like my parents, and I assume most people's parents, were employed by one employer for the majority of their time, And so you don't have it modeled for you. You don't understand how gig workers work yet.
Gig workers is the classification there. And I during the pandemic, I heard there was a whole IRS site that I didn't even know existed for gig workers. And, everybody in the industry, as I'm sure most of the listeners of your podcast knows, everybody from top to bottom, unless you're a studio executive, home base is, the assistant of an executive, and you have a full-time salaried position. Outside of those kinds of jobs, it is all from, paycheck to paycheck. Even if you're directing or writing, you go project basis.
Yeah. Even the people that make like the big bucks, they're like, yeah, I got paid $1 million, and I bought a house
2 years ago.
I bought half a house, and now I owe $1 million, and I have no jobs coming up, so I'm screwed.
Yeah, the main advantage of being a director is just that you get paid in a lump sum typically, so you're not dealing with like time cards and stuff. You have one contract instead of like, a pile of paperwork most of the time.
Yeah. Well, this is really boring topics. So I'll make it quick, but I didn't realize that I have like an S corp or whatever. I'm incorporated, and so when you get paid, instead of putting you on payroll, they do like treat you like a loan out, right? You're like an independent contractor. I didn't realize that not everyone can do that. This producer I worked with was like, oh yeah, if like a electrician or grip was like, hey, pay my loan out or my S corp, we would say no. Like it's not everyone gets that.
Yeah, not everyone gets that. And also like the rules they're shifting because of a handful of laws that are going into effect in California. So like when I did the feature at the beginning of 2020, where I was a producer and we were paying everybody, that was my responsibility. We did it through a payroll company so that we knew that everyone was getting a W-2 rather than traditionally you used to give everybody 1099s where they're quote unquote independent contractors. But because California, because of gig workers, because of Uber and things like that, a lot of those laws have kind of gotten a little wonky. And so as an extra layer of protection, both for ourselves and also for the people working for us, we kind of went through a payroll company. But depending on who's doing your accounting and how your corporation is set up, I think it can get a little tricky. So you really have to dot your I's and cross your T's. Back to Daniel's point about like knowing how to be an accountant, or at least be conversant with one, is a surprisingly big part of the job.
Yeah, there's all sorts of other things in this chapter that are just tickling my interest. Passive. You have a section called passive income on set. What is that? You bring a bunch of candy bars and sell them to the.
No, that's some of the things I started doing when I needed to fill days and I didn't have
you're
work
trading
5 days a
Bitcoin
week.
Is what you're saying, Daniel.
Exactly right.
You're into crypto.
I would be selling cryptocurrencies. That happened to me in an Uber once on the way in one morning. Somebody was trying to sell me a crypto or a Bitcoin. I didn't even know how that would happen.
I had a crew they were, for whatever reason, they were all into like cryptocurrency. It was
all
very
the camera
funny
department there.
Yeah.
Jess Dunlap, the DP we've worked with, he's always like talking about.
He's like, oh man, this one's up, Oren. You got to get in on this.
And they all know the one that's going to be the winner. This stock right here, I know a guy, I know a woman,
Right.
Somebody knows someone.
Yeah, but tell us, Daniel, what do you mean by passive income on set?
Yeah, honestly, you're not wrong. I mentioned the app Robinhood, which I found out about pretty early on in its life cycle when I was younger. As a PA in the beginning, and there's an arc that follows the whole book, which I'll very quickly say I kind of use my own experience as a basis for the chapters to carry through from one to the next. And I am not the world's best PA. I don't claim to be. There were PAs who rocked, were rock stars. They were way more awesome than I was, and they knew a lot more and they could do a lot more. But what I learned early on was that I started finding ways to focus on things I could do on set that would help earn a little extra stream of income somewhere, so I wouldn't just be making, at the time, I think the minimum wage in New York City, where I was doing the bulk of the work, was $11.50 or $12 an hour. And to get to bulk up a little bit and say, okay, if I'm going to work 60 hours this week, that's not too bad, but it would be nice to have a little bit extra. I started looking into trading ETFs on Robinhood when I have a few seconds to step away. I started finding out ways that I could not be distracted by my cell phone, but if I know I'm going to have, if the crew's going to have a lunch break and I'm going to be fire watching some equipment, I would step off to the side and, keep an eye on the equipment, but I'd be texting a few people saying, hey, I'm going to be available on Tuesday and Wednesday. Do you have anything, or do you know of anyone who's looking? Feel free to let me know. Those kinds of things, staying active while you're on the job site. I didn't know it was acceptable for a while, and then I found out, no, I kind of should be doing this.
Can you tell us what fire watching is, just for people that don't know?
Yeah, that's one of those terms that's kind of set up to get you if you don't know. If when the crew goes to lunch, or if there's a situation where the crew needs to step away for a location scout or something, and you have equipment on a location, a PA usually will be designated to fire watch that equipment, preventing any fires and putting them out if they occur. If somebody walks along and says, wow, this is a nice camera, and starts to try to pick it up, the PA is there to say, no, don't touch that. If it escalates, that's a different story, but you try to put the fires out if you can.
It's one of those jobs. That's one of the depressing PA jobs where it's like one of the most important jobs, but by far the most boring.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, like what am I doing? I'm not learning anything. Like I thought those assholes on that podcast told me that I'd be able to observe. All I'm observing is the back of a truck. I will say though, again on the feature, oftentimes we were like shorthanded on PAs in particular, and so I often, as producer, would be like, oh, I'll go fire watch because I can like multitask a ton, and I wanted that like half hour shift of just like decompressing and thinking about the next day and all of that stuff. So it does kind of come full circle where like all of a sudden you're kind of vying for a little peace and quiet for a second.
I bet there's like a cool invention you could come up with, like some sort of like electrical wire that you put on the perimeter of like all your gear that like, if you touch it, whatever,
like a motion
electrocutes
sensor
you, or
situation.
calls
Something goes off.
Yeah. Oren, why don't you invent that and then put it on your next set and then let me know how it goes.
Okay, I will. Okay, a couple more things. To vacation or not to vacation? That's a good one.
Ooh, yeah, that is good.
This whole chapter too, I tried to keep it as not as unboring as possible, because a lot of the accounting stuff is horribly boring, but it's, like you guys have said, you need to know it. But the vacation one, in the beginning, people would keep telling me, you don't get to take days off. You just got to keep working. You're a PA, you need to meet people. If somebody needs you, you're available. You take the job. And there's something to be said about that when you're starting out. I started out that way, but there comes a point where if you want to take a day off and maybe you've been working on 5 different sets, for a week, which happened to me. I had 3 weeks in a row, where every day during those 3 weeks, it was a different set. People on those sets don't know or may not know that you're working elsewhere full time. If you say, oh, I really got to take tomorrow off to relax, I've been, laughed at before and scoffed at. And when I would say that earlier on, they'd say, what are you talking about? You were here for a day and you already got to take a day off, please. And that situation is something that you kind of need to learn how to tread carefully when you're talking about taking time off.
Do you think if somebody calls you to PA and you say no, that they'll call you back again? Like, I feel like when I was first starting in the industry, there was a fear of saying no. I would just say yes to everything because I was afraid once I turned something down, they would never call me again. Which is why I constantly worked on set while I was sick.
Yeah.
Fevers thrown up, everything.
I never wanted to put anyone at risk.
Oren is patient zero.
I tried to balance if I was sick and not kill myself. And, I'm not trying to act like a prima donna or anything and say I would find excuses to not work. But
so let me ask though, Daniel, because it's certainly, like I think everybody needs a little bit of time to rest. And also I can understand if someone doesn't know your context, if you're saying, oh, I've worked a day and I need a day off, people could be flippant about that. What did you learn to rephrase it as? Like, how did you kind of craft that story? Do you just say like, oh, I'm actually, I'm booked on something else tomorrow? Or like, what was your go-to line to kind of set aside a day for yourself?
That's exactly it. What you just said. I'm already booked. That's something that it's an early phrase that you learn in the beginning. But if you need to take a day, you never want to say, oh, I'm going to be on vacation that day. I'm going to be out of town. Even if you are, again, this is so common for us, but a lot of people when they were starting out, I certainly didn't know, oh, I'm already booked that day. I'd love to work with you next time though. It does two things. It gives you the time you need and it lets the other person know that you're in demand. And then they will, say, I've got to be on the ball about getting this person because, hey, other people are hiring that person, even if they're not really.
Yeah, that's for actors too. My wife is always like, I'm shooting this thing, but I have this audition. I'm like, just tell them you're shooting something. That will make them want to audition you even more.
And if you don't know something, saying no, you never want to say no. You say, I'll find out. From day one, one of the first questions I was asked when I started working as an office PA on a major union production, do you know how to collate scripts? I had no idea what collating was at the time. And I said, I'm a fast learner. If you show me once, you'll never have to show me again. And I meant it. And I learned it that day. And, ever since then, I've been collating scripts for fun on the weekends.
Was that the best advice you ever got?
No, that was not the best advice I ever got. The best advice I ever got was from a wonderful actor, Leon Rippey. And he told a story about a production assistant who showed up to work on time every time. And one day he overslept and he got there late. And apparently the ADs just, reamed him a new one, so to speak, and were not very forgiving at all. And this PA was so upset that apparently left the business and never worked another day, decided to switch industries because of how badly he was verbally abused. So the best advice I ever got was grow a thick skin. From day one, grow a thick skin and just understand that there's people out there who are going to yell, and it's a high stress, high energy job, from writers' rooms to post-production suites to production on set. A lot of people are really stressed out and they're just looking for an excuse to take it out on someone. So just grow a thick skin.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm hoping, I feel like in the last few years in particular, people have become more aware of those problems. And so I feel like in the studio world, you hear more and more about them trying to build in fail-safes or ways to report that sort of behavior. Like I agree with you, Daniel. I think I don't want to sugarcoat anything. Sometimes people can get out of line, but I hope that we're learning how to fix those problems rather than accommodate assholes, I guess is what I'm getting at. But yeah, so, hopefully, I think, the other thing is like having good superiors, like having, there's a very clear pecking order for every single department. So if you are having an issue with somebody where they've crossed a line, look, being reprimanded, being disciplined, that stuff is part of the job, but also like no one deserves to be screamed at, Knowing
who you can talk to, knowing who you can confide in, it's you make friends as you go. And I also will very quickly add that when I did the first couple of drafts of my book, earlier on, I would share it with my close confidants and my screenwriting friends and say, what do you think? People I know who started out as PAs, and a lot of them would go straight to, oh, I hate all this, I hate all that. You're right, this is just such a terrible position. And there would be a lot of angst and anger, and people who didn't know about the industry would read it and say, wow, it sounds like a horrible job. Why would anyone want to do this? And I realized that I was probably instilling a lot of the negative experiences I had and letting that kind of dominate the story. But it's I wouldn't say it's the majority of experiences. They're some of the ones that stick with you the most because they're, so aggressively hurtful to your mental capacity and your spirit. You remember them, but it's not the primary thing that is happening to you, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, just in that spirit of positivity, why don't we give our listeners that want to be PAs a freebie and tell them what collating a script means?
So collating a script, if you're ever asked how to collate a script, it's there's going to be different versions of scripts as you go. If you're working on a TV show, for example, one episode could have, usually it's a color-coded system. So you'll start with a white script, and then there'd be blue pages and yellow pages, and then maybe a red script, which would be in the blue and the yellow pages are only a few pages, dialogue changed. A red script would be the third edition of changes they made. It was the full script. Collating is taking all the latest and greatest pages individually and combining them with the previous draft's pages. So basically updating a script page by page, or collating, you're merging together multiple drafts of a script to have one copy that is all the most recent pages.
And just to clarify, you literally mean that blue pages are printed on blue paper.
That's correct.
Red pages, it's so like when you look at a script, it can be like a little rainbow. And it's just so that you're not printing out the entirety of, a 100-page script over and over again every time somebody, tweaks one little thing.
Exactly. You don't want to have to reprint. There were many places I worked at that would, and in recent times, especially during the pandemic, the sets that I've been on, they're trying to be good about printing out even any paper at all, but there are still many instances where people prefer paper, people want paper, actors need paper. So this is something that's still being done even during these trying times from firsthand experience.
Let me ask, actually, because I don't really know, like, how do you physically collate a script? Are you literally tearing the old pages out and then putting in the new colorful pages?
The way that I learned to do it, that I was trained by that first coordinator who asked me, we had our scripts that were 3-hole punched and had 2 brads in them. And I would sit down, I would remove the brads, which I didn't know what that term meant. Brad. I thought it was, I'm thinking there's some guy named Brad who's going to come in the room and help me.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case. That's what they call the fasteners. I had no clue. I really had no clue.
So brads are the copper fasteners, basically, that you thread through a script to bind it, basically.
Right. And then you would remove those, and I would go page by page. Say I had the blue pages, I would see pages 2 and 96 have changed. And then if it's a feature, I guess, and I would go and I would remove the old page 2 and the old page 96, slip in the new colored pages.
So you do it by hand. Like it's
exactly.
I mean,
and there is like a digital equivalent to the colors, right? In Final Draft, it will mark, you do select which draft you're working on. And so you can see, even in the digital copy, if you're working with red pages or blue pages.
It's very accommodating for, people who are used to the page colors, and the digital solution is definitely there. It's just a question of who's adopted it and who's comfortable working with the having an iPad in their back pocket or on their shoulder instead of pulling out the script that's been freshly collated.
But if you're a filmmaker that's never really used the color system, and you are changing your script as you're shooting your indie film in the middle of Sioux City, Iowa, our favorite shout out place, then check out the color draft feature and Final Draft. It's pretty useful if you're changing your script as you're going. Well, we won't get through your whole book, but I'd love to ask about the name of the next chapter, because it's like totally the opposite of what I thought. It's all about who you don't know.
Yes. I'll be quick for the remaining chapters. I'll say
we don't. I think if we get through half of them, it's great, and then everyone will know that there's so much treasure.
I think the takeaway is that, like, there's a lot of things that if you want to be a PA, there's a lot of things to know and learn and to kind of dig in on, and it sounds like this book is a really good resource for that. So,
and just production in general. I mean, it doesn't seem like all of this stuff is, a lot of this stuff is PA specific, but like you're saying about being an accountant, about telling people like, I don't know how, but teach me and I promise you I'll do a great job. Like that applies to every single position.
Yeah,
in every department. So,
and even we were joking, but the collation stuff, like that is something that oftentimes a writer's assistant will do too. So like, that's a thing, or a script coordinator, or that's the beauty of being a PA, right? Is that like there's a lot of different skills from all of the different departments that you kind of get to acquire and find a foundation in before you decide what path you want to take.
Yeah, I think people, when I started out, and some people who may not be familiar with the larger productions where it's not an independent film and there's only one production assistant on the entire thing, if there's even one, there's a PA for a construction department. There's the office and the set that everybody knows about, but there might be a wardrobe PA. There might be the writer's PAs. I mean, across the board. And I've had the good graces and the good luck, I believe, to work as one of every PA, except writer's PA was the only PA form that I never actually had. I would assist the writer's PAs, and I had a lot of writer's PAs friends who kind of helped me piece together this book and gave me a lot of tidbits of what it was like working in a writer's room, which I know is one of the regular topics here that I've been hearing recently. But there's a lot to be said.
I think being writer's PA is the hardest job to get in Hollywood.
Yeah, it's competitive.
Genuinely, I think so.
Is PA usually the only non-union job in a department?
As far as I know, it's funny, when I started, at least here in New York City, the locations department, or rather the locations assistants, were non-union. But then somewhere along the line, I think they joined another union. And now, as far as I know, the PAs on most of the big shows and the big features, they are the last non-union position with craft services in some cases.
Right. So they're kind of like the entryway. If you want to work in camera, if you want to work in art, if you want to work in wardrobe costumes, if you can get a PA job, that's kind of like your funnel into that department, which is awesome. And you don't need to be in the union.
Exactly. Whichever world you want to work in. And it being all about who you don't know kind of flips on your head. I felt myself in the beginning, I don't know anyone because I didn't know anyone. And I thought that was really defeating, because then I'd feel down and I would beat myself up and I'd say, how am I going to get on a set? How am I going to one day direct a movie? I don't know where to go. I don't have anyone to call. As I went along, I kind of started telling myself it's all about who you don't know, because you never know where the next conversation is going to lead. Like we said earlier, on Craigslist, and I'm sure everyone here has experienced it. You meet someone who it's a quick conversation, but they'll remember your name because of some funny joke you told or some project you were working on that piqued their interest. And that conversation might come back and pay itself off in dividends, where they say, I remember that project. I want to talk to you more about that. They save your number, your email, or you reach out to them at a later date and they say, I remember you. Now I've got a job for you. If you go in thinking it's always about who I don't know, even if you're a director or an actor or, very super high successful Hollywood, you're always meeting new people. You're always growing that Rolodex. I like to think of things that way.
Cool. Yeah.
I think that's exactly right.
Well, chapter 4, I think is pretty awesome too. First steps. I mean, that's one of the things that on this podcast we try to dig into the most, because a lot of people will be like, yeah, my first job was writer's PA on Modern Family, and then I got into, and you're like, yeah,
and then I got an episode, and now
but all we care about is how you went from not knowing anyone to Modern Family. Like, we don't care what happened afterwards. We know how that works. So you have a whole chapter about this, first steps. I like this, you have a kind of subheading called experience only, no pay.
That's the Craigslist days right there.
Sure. Yeah.
And are you advocating for that people should take those jobs?
I don't necessarily advocate for it. I think that there's a level that when you start out, if you're someone like me, or if you're in a city where I recognize that not everybody who joins the industry comes from New York or LA or Georgia, or a place where there's tons of productions around. Sometimes all you have is that one unpaid way to get your feet wet. I think that in that kind of situation, or when you don't know anyone, you should take anything you can get without being, abused or asked to do something you're uncomfortable with. You learn, you grow, you meet new people, and that will only help you in the long run. So I think there's a point at which you should do experience only, no pay.
And then, so the next section is called saying no. So is that kind of about when you stop doing that?
That's more about finding the eloquent way to tell people to not really say no, but say no, to find a way to put yourself in a position where you have to say no. I mean, you can't say yes to everybody. You're gonna, as a production assistant on set, I was asked things everywhere I walked, every crew member, and it wasn't just me, it was all the PAs. They'd throw every question under the sun at us, and you have to be able to triage. You have to be able to understand which requires the most attention. And a lot of this comes through osmosis. That's what happened for me. But you find eloquent ways to turn people down and say, I'll get back to you. I haven't forgotten about you. Can't do that right now. That's what saying no kind of gets into.
Yeah. For me, it was actually like a big part of my growth as a person just working in this industry, was like learning to say no. I used to literally like have actor friends. I was friends with a lot of actors when I first moved to LA. They were just like, my roommates were actors, and they would just always ask me to shoot scenes for their reels and to edit their reels and do all this stuff. And it's like a lot of work. I was like the DP, the director, the editor, everything. I was lighting everything. And then I would just get so stressed out about all this stuff and not, getting paid for it. And one of my actor friends was like, I was expressing this to him. He's like, why don't you just say no? I was like, what? Like, I was like, I don't know. I guess I just feel mean. He's like, no, it's not mean. Like, just say no after you finish editing my reel. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, and also, like, I think sometimes people don't know, like actors, that your actor roommates don't know how hard it is to do the things that you're doing. the same way that like people on set sometimes don't know that Daniel, that the EP asked Daniel to go do something or whatever, like there's a hierarchy. And so if you're on a mission and you're doing something and they said that they need it in 5 minutes or whatever, and if you say yes, you're actually hurting yourself and also both of the requesters. That's the thing that's tricky.
That's very true. There's a ripple effect that you may unknowingly cause multiple problems to happen by thinking that I'm going to be helping out 2 people. Sometimes you need to be able to, know which comes first.
Right. And also, the ultimate ramification of all of this, a PA is part of a large machine, but if certain parts get gummed up, then you end up going into overtime, you end up staying longer, everyone gets tired, like it does actually have ramifications that can be a bummer, whether it's like not seeing your family or being sleep deprived or, things becoming unsafe or whatever. Like that's overly dramatic. Most of the time, any one task isn't going to cause this huge ripple effect, but, they do add up.
Well, on that note, thought maybe we can skip to chapter 12 called Who Needs Sleep? Because I know you put an entire chapter about sleep.
Mm-hmm. That's also the name of a documentary on the same subject,
yes.
Actually. Yeah.
Haskell
really?
Wexler made this beautiful. Yeah, I'm so glad you know it. It's not a lot of people know that one. If you haven't seen it, Oren, it's fantastic, and it's on Vimeo for free. I think IATSE put it up there.
I can't make it through.
Oh, no.
I just keep passing out.
No, it's great. That one was Brett on Pleasantville, the camera operator who died after a 19-hour day, and it was a horrible story. That was something that motivated a lot of the industry, the 12 on, 12 off movement in the early 2000s. That chapter is really dedicated to the physical. But what you said earlier, Matt, about sometimes you take in all those little tasks and you don't realize where it might lead. This is one dramatic example, but I did write about it because I thought it was important. There was a day where I took all those jobs and I made sure I did everything I could. And so did all the other PAs. We were all working our butts off on the show. But I reached a point where on my way home, I started falling asleep at the road, at the wheel rather, as I was driving home from a set in Brooklyn, coming back to Queens, which was about a 45-minute drive for me. And I was on the highway and I was just having these micro sleeps. I later learned they're called, where I'm having this in and out. And there was a moment where what woke me up was the rumbling of my car, against the guardrail and sparks shooting up from the metal on metal. It was only about a second, but that shook me so much that I kind of said at that day, I want to do so much more than being a PA. And I really would like to, like so many other people, I have stories to tell. I have things I'd love to write and things I'd love to direct. And I don't think it's worth killing myself as a PA and never reaching that point, to say yes to everybody. You have to be able to say no and balance out your physical health.
Yeah, the sleep thing is real. I had worked on a USC graduate thesis film, and our first AC didn't show up the second day. And he had been he fell asleep at the wheel and he was in the hospital. I think he had made a full recovery, but he never came back to set because he just fell asleep. And it's, especially when you're like a grip or an electrician, you're picking up like a 120 pound light, like on a 12-step ladder, and you're exhausted, it gets super dangerous.
Yeah. It's serious stuff for sure. And, film sets are naturally, fraught with risk, even when everything's going right, there's still a level of risk. That's the reason why actually in Los Angeles, everyone's being urged to shut down production because our hospitals are at zero capacity right now because of COVID. And so if somebody, trips and twists their ankle, that person can't get the care that they need. And you kind of have to assume that that's going to happen at some point on some set. And so it feels irresponsible to allow that sort of work to be happening.
Yeah, that's an important thing to mention. Even nowadays, being tired can lead you to maybe you're going to forget that you're not supposed to touch your face. And there's a situation where you might accidentally get really sick because you were so tired. And if you just had a little time to sleep and recover physically and, clean up and take care of yourself, that wouldn't have happened. So it is important. People forget sometimes.
Sure. Heavy stuff. Well, so on that note, actually, I thought that we could have a tiny conversation about the overall benefits of being a PA and maybe when it's time to no longer be one, you know, because I think that we've all met a person or two who, you know, moves out to Los Angeles or New York or Georgia or wherever with the stars in their eyes and the dreams of becoming a big fancy filmmaker. And somewhere along the way, they become the best PA you've ever met, but they are so good that they get trapped in that gig. Do you know what I mean? Like I think there's a threshold where all of a sudden that job doesn't pay off in terms of experience. You know, you've got it dialed in, but you can kind of maybe miss your opportunity to level up in some way or something like that. So, you know, I think that it's worth talking about a little bit.
Yeah, you're not wrong there. I think, you know, in regard to a situation where, and this is something that I ran into as a PA, where you're working so hard and you're doing a great job, you know, you believe you're doing a great job and people tell you you're doing a great job and you're just so laser focused on being the best PA in the world, but then you kind of forget why you started being a PA in the first place. Not many people become PAs to stay PAs forever. I met two people.
Yeah, I've met one. And he was, he was great. He was so good.
They're usually the best, and they're usually the most calm too. They're also the most, no disrespect, but physically aged people. You can see that they're the, you know, they look the oldest, but they're actually only 25 or something like, crazy.
Bro, you've been living hard. Yeah. He's like, yeah, I'm a full-time PA.
Yeah. Walked 627 miles in these shoes.
It is fun to, like, if you have a Fitbit or something, to see how many steps you get on set. That's it's no joke for sure.
I was in the top 1% of active walkers in New York City, all of New York City 1 week, according to my Google Fit statistics. I was very proud.
In a city of walkers, you know, people are walking everywhere. That's pretty darn good, Daniel. Well done, buddy.
Millions of people. I'm very proud of that one.
Yeah, you're walking here.
Yeah. Well, what was, to Matt's question, what are some of the benefits of being a PA?
In my experience, and a lot of people's experience, there's situations that you get exposed to that you wouldn't be exposed to through any other position if you went right in to working on independent productions or starting at a rank. For example, I know some very great DGA ADs who started working as ADs, you know, on independent and just skipped PAing altogether, and they gave themselves that level of responsibility. They missed some of the fun that can be had as a PA, where you don't have to think everything is on your shoulders. You know, as an AD, assistant directors are very much in tune with the budgets and the schedules, specifically the schedule. And if we're not going to make our day, they start getting really nervous and antsy. And, you know, some of them do, some of them don't. But as a PA, you're there to support the assistant directors. You're in the assistant director department in most places, but you have a level of, I can breathe a little bit and step back and have some fun. And there's this great actor like Leon Rippey, for example. He's just one of many, but I got to chat with him on a few occasions. Brian Dennehy, you know, before he passed away, I had conversations about acting as a film performer that I got from his perspective that I believe and I hope will inform me better when I reach the point where I'm directing, you know, my first feature film. Little lessons that I learned that I was able to pause and talk to a performer or veteran crew member because I didn't have to worry about running nonstop, high octane to make sure we make our day because it's all on my shoulders. Hopefully that makes sense. That's one of the good things.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the opportunity, like we've been talking about, to observe and to engage and to kind of dabble, you know, I think is pretty great.
Yeah, and you gave Brian Dennehy some notes too, right? Some acting notes.
I gave him a few. I told him that, you know, he's got to play it a little bit more like he did in First Blood. Just a little bit more.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, so speaking of that, like kind of, you know, you mentioned directing a feature, doing the other thing, kind of like learning all these things. What's you're a filmmaker also. Where are you now? How did this form you as a filmmaker today?
This is a very valid question. I am very much in the boat of people who likes to think you could make it through this life and this industry specifically without being one thing. I know that everybody in this room does multiple things. Nobody just wears one hat. And I feel for a while, the way the industry was based on stories that I heard, where if you join this union and you do this job, that's what you do, and you don't really step out of that. And people do still do that. You know, if you could be a fantastic assistant editor and remain an assistant editor, or you could be a fantastic costumer and stay that. But I've always liked to move around laterally. So when I reached a point in my PA career, and there were a few things that influenced my decision, but I reached a point where I didn't think I learned everything. I'll never learn anything. I don't think anyone will reach that point, but I learned what I needed to learn. I wanted to take next steps. So I started working as a camera operator. I found an opportunity to work for Amazon and a few other local non-union production arms of some major companies here in New York City, because I didn't join the union at that point. And I started learning new skills. You know, as a camera operator, I did some sound mixing. I did some non-union crew member work, and I was saying these are skills that now I learned how to work with some of the biggest and most powerful talents by being on those big union signatory jobs. Now I'm working on slightly smaller things, but I'm buffing up those technical skills that I was really practicing back in college and when I was making movies in my backyard as a kid. Now I'm kind of visiting that on a new level. And in recent times, during the pandemic, after I finished writing the book, I've been trying to combine all of that and say I got the people skills as a PA, which I think is the best thing that you can get as a PA is good communication and people skills that you can only polish what you already have as a PA, but I'm combining that with the technical that I've gotten. And I'm starting to work more on developing my YouTube channel. I have plans for 2021, some of the films that I shoot with friends and sending those on the festival circuits, which I'm learning a lot about through Just Shoot It, of course, and preparing my first feature. Oh yeah, of course. There's a lot of great lessons out here that I've been listening to. So I'm trying to combine it all.
Cool. Let me ask you a random question that I just thought of. When you're PAing on something, how often do you end up watching the thing that you PA'd on?
There was one jokester teamster who once said to me, "We're so busy making television that we never have time to watch it." And I kind of adopted that policy of more by choice, less by not being able to do it. But a lot of the jobs I worked on, I wouldn't watch them because I didn't want to revisit some of the negative experiences that I had on sets. They happen everywhere. Some are worse than others, but I don't watch much of what I worked on as a PA now.
It's funny. It is hard to fathom. I remember hearing those stories when I was younger. I was like, what do you mean you don't watch the thing you worked on? Like, that's the whole point. And like, it's, look, you were there, like you've been working on it. It's like you watched that show in slow motion. Every 2 minutes was 12 hours of your life.
I'm trying to think of, when I used to dolly grip a lot and I boom opped and I've done a lot of various positions. I PA'd a little. And I'm trying to think of what things I watched and what I didn't, because just zooming out for a second, thinking of yourself as a filmmaker and saying like, okay, I'm on set. I get to be next to Brian Denny and I get to talk to him about a performance and I get to see where they put the cameras, see how they move the dolly and see, where the lights are. And I want to see how this shot looks. And, a lot of times on set, you can see on the monitor, you get a feeling for the performance and the cinematography, but you can't know if the story and the thing you're working on actually works is good unless you watch the finished product, with the music and the sound effects and the editing. And I guess I probably should have watched more, because like I remember when I was dolly gripping, like all I really cared about was like what this shot looked like. I never really thought like, oh, this dolly move is really telling this story because this character is like, we're following them into a new world. And I kind of, regret not spending more time like seeing my project all the way to the end, because that's, I think, like would be like the best learning experience, right? Watch what you work on, even if it's bad. And believe me, like most of the stuff I think I worked on, like the Craigslist stuff, like I knew it was bad, like on set, like the shots didn't even look good, let alone like the story.
I'll kind of double down on that, but I think that there is a thing that you can do that maybe makes life a little easier in case you are working on something that you don't know when it's going to be if you're on a short or whatever, it's not really under your control. Maybe you get an email, maybe you see on Facebook that it's been posted or something, but probably not. But you can read the script and then you're at least informed with what it is you're shooting in the first place. And that, similar to what I was saying before about when I was younger, the idea of crewing on something and having not read the screenplay sounded insane to me as well. But that's true most of the time. most people haven't read the screenplay.
Oh yeah, many of the not only additional PAs, but additional crew members, regular union crew members, they just pop in on a day-to-day basis and they have no idea what's going on. They just do what they're told.
Dude, we work on commercials where there's literally half a page scripts and people don't read them. Like,
that's crazy.
I have no idea what
you're like, it takes you longer to not read the script than it does to read it.
Yeah.
At that point, it's so easy to just look down. I mean, come on now. There's when it's a script for a TV show or a feature, it's a different world.
Yeah. But like I said, I think it does help you. Like, you do see like, oh, okay, like the camera moves in this way and I know that I'm supposed to feel this way about it. And, you can infer some of that stuff, but having the big picture, I think, is really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, that is a good thing. I do think, especially in the commercial world, we've kind of been entrenched in recently, like the producers never really care if the crew has read the script. And I think it would be nice, actually, when they send the call sheet to also send the script, the storyboards to the whole crew and say like, hey, by the way, this is what we're shooting. Because I don't know, Matt, if it's happened to you, but I've worked on things where at the end of the day, the gaffer's like, oh, this is pretty cool. I get it now. Oh, so this is it. And I'm like...
You're like, yeah, but you were pitching ideas.
Yeah.
So that's the benefit of working on some slightly smaller projects too, or some of those mega productions that I'll admit I never worked on in Avengers or something on that level.
Yeah, they wouldn't allow you to read the
exactly. I've worked on a Marvel production or two before, and just as an example, that's the type of production where things are so redacted and the pages are so carefully selected and handed out that they will not, like you just said, they will not let you read it as a PA. There's only a select few people who are allowed to even know what's going on, which I thought was counterintuitive, like you guys are saying. And going in, I like to know, even as a PA, what's the goal here? If I'm just going to be standing on a street corner and locking it up, preventing people from walking into the shot, that's fine. I can do that. But if I'm going to be involved, in helping you make the scene at all, it is good to know what's going on.
Yeah, at least a little more enriching. But yeah, no, I think to your point, like there are a lot of productions, even things less secretive than, say, a Marvel movie, where Oren and I experience it firsthand. When our wives are auditioning for a TV show or something, half the time the script doesn't make sense because they've changed the character names and the jokes even to the point where it's like, oh.
That's why nothing my wife does is funny. Like, they change the jokes.
Yeah.
It's not your fault, babe.
It's fine.
Just kidding. She's hilarious.
It's the script.
She's very funny. Yeah.
You worked on The Tick. That's cool.
That was a fun one. Yeah.
Oh, wait, did you really? Oh, that's excellent, man. The Ben Edlund, the Amazon version, right?
Yes, that one. I remember seeing Peter Serafinowicz on set for the first time. I think I pronounced his last name correctly there. Yeah, he and that was a very interesting job because of the suits and the prosthetics that they had on people. Yeah, I was there for about a week. That was a great show.
Awesome. Well, Daniel, remind us again how people can find the book and buy it and all that stuff.
If you're interested, the book cost $15.99.
Ooh, a bargain.
My idea was $1 per chapter. That's kind of what I said. I think I've done enough work that it should be $1 per chapter. There's 16 chapters in the book. There's some booksellers that sell it for less. Somehow on eBay, it's already used. I don't know how that happened, but hey, there it is. So look around and you'll find a bargain.
There's a Kindle version too, right? $10.
Yes. The ebook version is only $10. Thank you for reminding me. They're all linked on my website, passingplanes.com/book. And the dedication I'll spoil, because I think this is important, is to all the production assistants who are credited or not. That's one part of my dedication, because it's many times a thankless job, and the few people that do thank you, it means all the more as you go along in your own career and you figure out where you're headed.
Yeah, shout out to our PAs. Yeah.
Hey, PA, I don't remember your name, but you're pretty cool. Thanks for the coffee. Next time, half and half, not milk. Thank you. Just kidding.
I always stay for the names in the credits. PA's names in the credits, I stay.
I haven't told this story in kind of a while, Daniel, but I think you'll appreciate it. So when I did go get coffee, speaking of, this is more as an intern than as a PA, but I would go on coffee runs, and I would try my hardest, and I would always fuck something up. Somebody wouldn't get cream, or they wouldn't get they get a chocolate pump instead of a vanilla pump or whatever. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to drink black coffee for the rest of my life. And someday somebody's going to have to go get me a coffee, and it's going to be as easy as possible. Black coffee, done. And I still drink black coffee to this day.
Well, mine is black coffee with half and half. What's the difference?
How much half and half? Is non-dairy creamer okay?
No. Well, I mean, if there's nothing else.
What, they've only got, is soy okay? Do cream? I don't know.
I prefer not.
Coffee Mate or Hood. People would be specific about the brands.
There you go. Black coffee, easy.
Matt, the converse to yours, and hopefully Daniel backs me up, though he probably won't. I think like a PA that drinks coffee and knows coffee is good, because the worst is when you have a PA get you some coffee drink and then they bring you the wrong thing and you're upset. And they like just don't get it. They're like,
they don't get
it.
Yeah.
Person freaking out about? What's the difference? A half and half in milk. It's like the same thing. Who cares? Or vanilla. Like people put the vanilla creamer in. I have to stop the shoot.
Only reason I cannot back you up there, Oren, is because my definition of I love coffee. I'm a coffee drinker, but my definition of a good cup of coffee was so vastly different from half the people I got coffee to. So I would say, this is how I drink my coffee. It's fantastic. And they would say, this is disgusting. Never bring it this way. It's subjective.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree on that. I'm just kidding. Well, Daniel, are you down to stick with us for some unpaid endorsements?
I would love to.
Unpaid endorsements.
I got 2 locked and loaded ready for you. All right, so the first one, it's a little bit, I'm chuckling because I haven't actually read the article, but it's really just an excuse to bring up maybe the most famous PA of all time. Daniel, do you know who I think of when I think of highly successful PAs?
Highly successful.
Abby Singer.
There's
no, that's a good one.
Gosh.
No, I won't leave you on the hook. Bill
Kathleen
Hader.
Kennedy? Oh, Bill Hader.
Bill Hader. Wait, Kathleen Kennedy, she did start as a PA. That's true.
She was Steven Spielberg's assistant. I think her first job was as a PA, and Spielberg plucked her.
Well, Hader was like a proper PA for, he was like a PA's PA for a long time. He was a proper gopher, and then kind of lightning struck and he ended up on SNL. But like, if SNL had not happened, he would have been a career PA. And so there's a Fast Company article called How Bill Hader Went from Production Assistant to SNL Hero to Leading Man. That we can share in the show notes, but it's always something that I found especially charming because I always thought he was very funny, and just was like the funny PA on set, and then somehow got discovered. So yeah, it's pretty fun. And then the other thing I have to endorse, my other endorsement, is a film called The Donut King, which is out. It's available on VOD. You can get it on Amazon and iTunes and all that stuff. And it's a documentary about a man who is a Cambodian refugee who came to Southern California and basically is responsible for like 85 to 90% of all of the Southern California donut shops. It's a statistical truth that like the majority, especially like in the 80s and 90s, the majority of donut shops in Southern California were owned by Cambodian refugees. And so he was this mogul, right? Like the reason that we have pink donut boxes is because of him. Like he
invented the color pink.
He did it as a cost saving method. And then also pink is like good luck in Cambodian culture. And I
was going to say there must be a cultural angle. That's so interesting.
Well, and it kind of coincides with the advent of fast food and car culture. And basically, Cambodia was under siege, right? And so there were all of these refugees. He sponsored 100 different families. And he basically franchised out all of these mom and pop donut shops. And the film is just really fun, really great, has like kind of big, broad social implications, a little bit of history, like wonderful characters, all of the different people that he helped bring over. His brother-in-law started this company and that company, the nature of like Winchell's and Dunkin' Donuts and how they couldn't get a foothold in Southern California because of this guy. And he's a huge character as well. It's really wonderful. And super well shot. It's by a DP/director named Alice Gu. And so she just really wonderful, really fun, tons of style, and that perfect mixture of like entertainment value, great characters, and historical and social context all in one. So Donut King is my recommendation. Daniel, what you got, buddy?
Well, that's a hard act to follow.
I know. I'm sorry. I was locked and loaded. I'm sorry.
I also felt like I was locked and loaded, but now I feel like I was wrong to think that I was locked and loaded. It's a very quick 3-parter. I just finished reading Keeper of the Clown, My Life with Ernest by John Cherry. And I'm going to hold the book up to the people who can see it. But the cover, if you hold this on the subway while you're reading this, look up the cover on Amazon of Keeper of the Clown, people. And you'll
crazy.
see Ernest, played by Jim Varney, a lot of people remember.
Sure.
Oh, like the Ernest movies.
Yeah.
The Ernest
know what I
movies,
mean?
not Jim Varney.
Yeah.
Or Slinky Dog from Toy Story. Such an interesting career. And Keeper of the Clown was written by the producer who, John Cherry, who, thought up the idea of Ernest and kind of brought Jim Varney on and gave him the role. And then the rest is history. It started with commercials. And I didn't even realize how many commercials. There were like 1,500 commercials that were shot with Ernest before he made the movies that I knew him for when I was younger.
Well, and they would do these. I remember as a kid being blown away. I was like, wow, this is crazy. They would do like basically the same spot as a oneer over and over and over again. They must have just like done it all day long, but for, every different car dealer in every market.
John Cherry wrote about how they had a few scripts that they would kind of almost like a Rolodex of jokes and scripts and say, Ernest, this works really well with dairy farms. This one works really well. Yeah. And they would just go like that.
He had like a fire ants bit that was in the movies. And also they did on like the Roseville Auto Mall. And I remember as a child just being like, what is going on? How do commercials work?
Yeah. I never even understood. I was like, Ernest, is that like, I think as a kid, I knew it was crazy and funny, but I never quite understood what he was. He's kind of like if Pee Wee Herman and the Micro Machines Man had like a baby.
That's a great, it's a great
Pretty
analogy.
good, Oren. It's pretty good.
I wanted to know more about him too. That's why I picked up the book, because I knew, Ernest Saves Christmas. I was watching it this year as I celebrate Christmas. It's one of my natural Christmas movies. And I said, this is a year I need to laugh. Is there more about Ernest that I can read? And I found this book. This one came out a couple years ago, I believe. And then his nephew, Jim Varney's nephew, Justin Lloyd, wrote another book called The Importance of Being Earnest. I just finished the first book. This one I haven't started yet, but I'm excited to. And the reason I'm saying all this is to build up to part 3 of this unsolicited recommendation, which is The Importance of Being Earnest, the documentary film, which was it was supposed to go into production in 2020, but obviously things happened. So now if you go to beingearnestfilm.com, I just recently found out about it. I'm so excited to see that they're making a documentary about the life of Jim Varney at a time where I think the world needs to laugh a little bit more and think about some silly slapstick comedy.
Well, Daniel, I had no idea you were such an Ernest head. That's
You're just catching me on a week where I'm really feeling Ernest, and I said, nope, this needs to be shared more.
Perfect. I love it.
Yeah, and I love your spin-off from Unpaid Endorsements of the unsolicited recommendations.
You see what happens when you're trying to think of words and you can't remember what the right words are? You just go.
Boy. Well, you've got 250 episodes of me stumbling through the English language. So I feel you, Daniel.
And me saying like a lot.
Oren, what you got, buddy?
So, Matt, I know I sent you this tweet. I just put it in the cast chat, Daniel, so you can watch it. But there is this TikToker, and her name is Mad Matthies. I don't know what her real name is, but her Twitter handle is Mad, MADMATTHIES. And she's just like a TikToker that posts videos with crazy transitions in them. And somehow she just posted one video that went viral, and everyone on Twitter. So I realized from this that I'm like part of like old man Twitter, which is like people that don't quite understand TikTok. And all these like Hollywood people are like, oh my God, this is like the best editing I've ever seen in a video. And I was watching it, and it's basically this young woman is just in her room. She films everything by herself, and she does it's just these crazy transitions. Obviously it'll be in the show notes. You can check it out. But, she'll like push her head off the screen, and then she like appears behind herself, and she spins her head all the way around like 360 degrees. And it's not Instagram filters or Snap or TikTok filters or anything. It's like 100% editing. And someone that was like a showrunner on some big show, like, I don't know, it might have been like The Blacklist or something, was like, I've been in this industry for 30 years. This is the best editing I've ever seen. And so
I have a follow-up question, though, because I think everyone at home is thinking, yeah, I've seen those videos or whatever. This is the fastest version. Like, it's jam-packed. There's probably, I don't know, 100 edits in this, 30-second video. Oren, have you watched it frame by frame? Is she doing any sort of, like, wiping or blending or anything like that? Or are they strictly hard cuts?
So we actually haven't gotten to my endorsement yet because that will answer it. So I'm not endorsing this video because it's already gone viral on its own. But I was doing what Matt is saying. I was like, how am I, a 400-year-old man that's been working in Los Angeles since 1932, not knowing how she's doing these amazing transitions in her bedroom? And I was literally just trying to do them. Like, she does this one where her head spins all the way around. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll try to do that. I'll turn my head around halfway, then I'll put my shirt on backwards and go, put myself backwards and turn my head around and try to edit it together in After Effects. And I did it, and it didn't even look good. It looked bad, And so I did a little research on her, and she has a YouTube channel where she does tutorials on her transitions. And not just that, but she talks about them like they're no big deal. She's like, yeah, if you've been on TikTok, everyone does this one. You push your face to the side, you do this. And she's like, people ask me like what editing software I use. And I pretty much do everything just in the TikTok app. This is 100% done in the TikTok app. It's all cuts. The only thing she does is she'll trim the beginning and ending. She does it all herself. She's like, okay, I mean, if you want to be advanced, you can get one of these LED lights. It's a New whatever. It's like this $12 light from Amazon. And I think she has an iPhone or something. And that's it. And
she's not speed ramping or anything?
No speed ramps. And
that's really interesting.
It's like mind boggling, right?
There were a few instances where she's going so quickly and like things are smearing across the screen and stuff that I would imagine that, like, if I could pause, I would imagine that there would be instances where it looks like there's actually two instances of her on screen.
Right, where you see her twice on screen. No, you don't. I think she does have like a fake head that she spins sometimes, but mostly she doesn't. And if you watch her tutorial video, what's amazing about it is not actually how she makes these things, but how ingrained it is in her brain, where she's like, okay, so you just push your head over here and we'll bring it back. And then we'll make a face and we'll do this and we'll do this. And she's making the video in real time. Like, she's just recording and then the next bit and the next shot and the next shot. She's like, I'll change my hat. I'll do this. Maybe I'll stick my tongue out. Maybe I'll put glasses on. It's just like she thinks in terms of transitions, which is like, I thought I did, but apparently I don't. Like, she'll never do a move that doesn't have an out move, like everything has an in and an out. Anyway, Mad Matthies, check her out. She's crazy. Check out the tutorials. She has like 1,200 followers on YouTube, even though she's got like millions of people that have watched her other video. She has 1,700 subscribers on YouTube and 4,000 views on this TikTok transitions for beginners. So I'm blowing the lid off this.
There you go. Well, Oren, I can't wait for you to become a TikTok star. Daniel, I can't wait for you to become a famous director. And
you're so kind.
And Matt, I can't wait for your podcast to blow up.
I can't wait for tomorrow. Let's start there, right?
There you go. Well, Daniel, how can listeners learn more about you, keep track of what you're up to?
They can visit passingplanes.com. I have all my social handles there, and I'm in the middle of figuring out how I want to do social media moving forward. Clearly, I'm doing it wrong because this woman is just blowing my mind. I can't look away from the video. I honestly cannot look away.
It is hypnotic, for sure.
And she has multiple videos. Like, if you go to she has a newer one than this that she posted on Twitter.
Blow my mind. But, I mean, yeah, if anybody wants to follow little old me at this point, which I don't think they're going to want to, passingplanes.com, there's all sorts of different handles and stuff there. So my pleasure to be here with you guys.
Perfect. Well, you can also grab your book as well. If you've forgotten passingplanes.com because you're driving in your car or you're on a run or something like that, you can always go to justshootitpod.com. We'll have all the stuff that we talked about in the show notes there. And you can check us out on social media at justshootitpod across Instagram and Twitter and the like. And me at Mr. Matt Enlow.
And I'm at O Kaplan on Instagram. I'm at Smitey Pyleg on Twitter and TikTok, by the way. And if we would love to hear from you, if you were ever a PA that got yelled at or you enjoy yelling at PAs, email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your story. This episode was edited by Sarah Weirda. Our social media master is Derek Aiello. Our webmaster is Ewan Williams. And the music you're listening to is from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jahzzar. And we will catch you next time. Thanks, everyone. everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.